The Way We Were wasn't supposed to work. It was too political, too depressing, a romance where the couple doesn't end up together. In 1973, every studio in Hollywood laughed them out of the room, but somehow, it became one of the most iconic love stories ever made. Behind the scenes, script rejections, on-set warfare between two actors who couldn't stand each other, a director caught between a controlling star and a studio ready to pull the plug. Real injuries, missing footage that's never been recovered. Here are 30 weird facts about The Way We Were you didn't know, and they're stranger than any fiction Hollywood could write. Fact 1. Barbra said no 3 times. Arthur Lawrence watched Barbra Streisand at a Hollywood party in 1970 and immediately knew she was Katie Morosky. He wrote the entire screenplay with her in mind, crafting every scene around her intensity. But when he sent it to her, she rejected it 3 times. Her reason: Katie was too plain, too political, too unsexy. Streisand had built her career on glamorous roles with elaborate costumes and show-stopping musical numbers. The script sat in development hell for nearly 2 years, while Lawrence refused to rewrite it for anyone else. She finally said yes in 1972, but only after her agent convinced her it could win her an Oscar. Fact 2. The studio demanded a happy ending. In the first draft approved by Columbia Pictures, Katie and Hubbell reunite in the final scene. They kiss outside the Plaza Hotel and fade to black with a happy ending. Arthur Lawrence absolutely hated it. He fought Columbia for months, telling executives they were destroying the entire point of the story. He threatened to remove his name from the film entirely if they forced the reconciliation. Columbia didn't budge until test audiences saw it and responded brutally. Dishonest, manipulative, ruins the whole movie. The studio finally let Lawrence restore his original bittersweet ending. Lawrence never trusted Hollywood studios again after that fight. Fact 3. Ryan O'Neal got offered more money. Robert Redford wasn't Columbia's first choice for Hubbell. The studio wanted Ryan O'Neal, fresh off his massive success with Love Story and What's Up Doc. They offered him significantly more money than Redford would eventually receive, with better billing and creative control. O'Neal read the script, liked it, but turned it down flat. His reason? He didn't want to play second fiddle to Barbra Streisand. After carrying Love Story to box office gold, he felt he'd earned leading man status. The rejection stung Columbia so badly that executives considered shelving the entire project. They only moved forward when Redford's agent came calling. Fact 4. Every major studio rejected it. Before Columbia said yes, Arthur Lawrence pitched The Way We Were to every major studio in Hollywood. Warner Bros. Executives literally laughed during the pitch meeting, calling it a downer about ugly politics and a doomed relationship that nobody wants to see. Universal passed without reading the full script. MGM said it was too Jewish, too political, too depressing. Paramount told Lawrence that audiences wanted escapism, not reminders of McCarthyism. One executive reportedly asked, "Who wants to watch beautiful people be miserable for 2 hours?" Columbia only greenlit it because they owed Barbra Streisand a picture from a previous deal and had no other viable scripts ready. Fact 5. Katie was based on real blacklist victims. Arthur Lawrence didn't just write Katie Morosky from imagination. He based her character on his own experiences with McCarthyism and friends who were blacklisted in Hollywood during the 1950 seconds. The script originally included much more explicit references to Communist Party membership and detailed HUAC hearing accounts. But in 1972, Columbia's legal department still feared controversy. They forced Lawrence to soften Katie's political affiliations substantially, removing scenes where she attended communist meetings and watering down her testimony. Lawrence later called these cuts cowardly and said they gutted the character's moral courage. He spent decades trying unsuccessfully to restore the deleted material, which may be lost forever. Fact 6. Sidney Pollack was fourth choice. Director Sidney Pollack wasn't Columbia's first, second, or even third choice. The studio first approached Francis Ford Coppola, who turned it down to focus on The Godfather Part 2. William Friedkin passed because he thought it was too soft after directing The French Connection. Mike Nichols said no without explanation. Studio head David Bagelman was so desperate he offered Pollack complete creative control and final cut. Pollack later admitted he absolutely did not have the creative control promised. Once filming began, Columbia started demanding changes, questioning his choices, and threatening to replace him if he went over budget. The promise of autonomy was just bait. Fact 7. The budget almost killed it. 3 weeks before shooting was scheduled to begin, Columbia nearly pulled the plug entirely. Budget projections had soared from $4.5 million to over $7 million before a single frame was shot. The reason? Barbra Streisand's demands. She insisted on additional costume changes, more elaborate sets, and bringing her own hairstylist, makeup artist, and personal assistant on location at studio expense. Columbia executives were furious, calling it star excess, and threatening to sue her for breach of contract. Streisand's lawyer argued her contract gave her appearance approval. The studio ultimately caved but slashed other parts of the budget to compensate, cutting planned location shoots and reducing the shooting schedule by a full week. Fact 8. The Malibu sequence almost got cut. Columbia executives wanted to completely eliminate the Malibu beach house sequence, claiming it added nothing to the plot and was self-indulgent romantic fluff. They argued the movie should jump directly from the wedding to the Hollywood blacklist conflict. Sydney Pollack threatened to quit, arguing the sequence was essential to showing their marriage deteriorating. The standoff lasted days with angry phone calls and threats from both sides. The compromise? They would shoot it in 3 days instead of 7, with a skeleton crew and minimal equipment. Robert Redford agreed to work those 3 days for free to save money and keep the sequence in the film. It's now considered one of the movie's most beautiful sections. Fact 9. The producer's affair created chaos. Ray Stark, the film's producer, had a notorious affair with one of the production assistants during filming. It wasn't subtle. They were seen together constantly, disappearing during shoots, and creating uncomfortable tension on set. The situation became so disruptive that Sydney Pollack actually had the woman reassigned to a different production. Stark was absolutely furious and threatened to fire Pollack for overstepping his authority. He went to Columbia demanding the director be replaced. Columbia intervened, but only because they were already over budget and behind schedule. Replacing the director mid-production would have been a financial disaster. Stark and Pollack barely spoke for the rest of filming, communicating only through intermediaries. Fact 10. Harvard rejected them for politics. The film's famous opening college campus scenes were almost shot at Harvard University, which would have given the movie instant Ivy League prestige. The production team scouted locations, negotiated preliminary terms, and administrators seemed receptive. Then they actually read the script. Harvard's board denied permission immediately, calling the political content inappropriate for Harvard's image. They were particularly concerned about scenes depicting communist sympathizers and radical student organizing happening on their campus. The rejection forced the production to scramble for alternatives. They ended up using Union College in Schenectady, New York, a small liberal arts school that agreed for a $25,000 location fee, a fortune for them in 1972. Fact 11. Barbra and Redford barely spoke. Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford barely spoke to each other off-camera throughout the entire production. Their relationship was professional but ice-cold. Redford later admitted he found Streisand exhausting and controlling, saying she wanted to micromanage every aspect of every scene. Streisand told friends that Redford was emotionally unavailable and impossible to connect with. Cast and crew noticed the tension immediately. There were no friendly lunches, no offset bonding, no casual conversations, just awkward silences and polite distance. The strange irony? Their lack of genuine chemistry actually served the film perfectly. The story is about two people who can't bridge their fundamental incompatibility, and that real-life disconnect translated beautifully on screen. Fact 12. 47 takes of one scene. The reunion scene outside the Plaza Hotel should have been simple. Two former lovers run into each other, a brief conversation, done. Instead, Barbra Streisand demanded 47 takes. She wanted to try different emotional approaches, different line readings, different physical positions. Robert Redford's frustration grew with each take. By take 30, he was visibly annoyed. By take 40, according to crew members, he walked off set and disappeared for 2 hours. Sydney Pollack had to personally track him down and convince him to return. When Redford came back, they shot 7 more takes to appease Streisand. The final film uses take 11, not any of Streisand's preferred later takes. She reportedly never forgave Pollack for that choice. Fact 13. Bradford Dillman was drunk. Bradford Dillman, who played JJ, was drunk during several of his scenes, particularly the cocktail party sequences. It wasn't method acting. He was going through a brutal divorce and, in his own later admission, self-medicating throughout production. He showed up to set with alcohol on his breath, slurred words occasionally, and needed multiple takes to get through dialogue. Sydney Pollack knew, the crew knew, everyone knew. But Pollack looked the other way because Dillman's performance was actually strong when he pulled it together, and they were already behind schedule. Firing him would have meant reshooting all his scenes, which the budget couldn't absorb. Dillman later got sober and expressed regret, calling it unprofessional and embarrassing. Fact 14. The lighting war. Barbra Streisand clashed violently with cinematographer Harry Stradling Jr. over her lighting throughout the production. Streisand had very specific ideas about how she should be lit, which angles worked for her face, which shadows were flattering. Stradling felt she was undermining his artistic judgment. The conflict exploded when Streisand stopped to take mid-scene and screamed at Stradling in front of the entire crew that he was trying to make her look ugly. The set went silent. Stradling put down his light meter, walked off set, and threatened to quit. It took Sydney Pollack hours to negotiate a compromise where Streisand got approval over her close-up lighting setups, while Stradling maintained control over overall scene lighting. They communicated only through assistants afterward. Fact 15. Redford refused to rehearse. Robert Redford refused to rehearse the intimate bedroom scenes with Barbra Streisand, believing that over-rehearsing would make them feel mechanical and staged. He wanted spontaneity and genuine reaction. This approach infuriated Streisand, who meticulously prepared for every scene, analyzing motivations and planning every emotional beat. She saw his refusal as laziness and unprofessionalism. He saw her preparation as overthinking that would kill authentic emotion. Their first bedroom scene required 23 takes largely because they had completely different approaches and couldn't sync their performances. Streisand wanted precision and control. Redford wanted instinct and surprise. They were acting in two different movies, and Sydney Pollack was caught in the middle trying to blend their incompatible styles into something coherent. Fact 16. Your girl is lovely, Hubbell. The film's famous final line, "Your girl is lovely, Hubbell," wasn't in the original script. That devastating, gracious, heartbreaking moment. Pure improvisation. Barbra Streisand added it during a take, and Robert Redford's somewhat stunned reaction is completely genuine because he wasn't expecting her to say anything beyond the scripted dialogue. He had no prepared response. His awkward "she is" and hasty goodbye captured Hubbell's guilt perfectly, but it wasn't acting, it was real confusion. Sydney Pollack loved it so much he immediately decided to keep it, despite Arthur Lawrence initially objecting. Lawrence felt it made Katie too accommodating, but Pollack argued it showed her growth and dignity. The line became iconic and is now inseparable from the film's legacy. Fact 17. The hair push became iconic by accident. Katie pushing back Hubbell's hair became one of cinema's most iconic romantic gestures completely by accident. Barbra Streisand did it instinctively during their first romantic scene because Robert Redford's famously floppy hair kept falling in his face and genuinely bothering her. It wasn't scripted, rehearsed, or planned. She just reached up and moved it aside without thinking. Sydney Pollack noticed it created an incredibly intimate, tender gesture that revealed Katie's affection and need to care for Hubbell. He asked Streisand to incorporate it throughout the film as Katie's signature move, a physical manifestation of her love and her desire to fix him. The gesture appears in multiple scenes and became so associated with the film that it's been parodied and referenced countless times. Fact 18. Thunder in the background. The intense argument scene where Katie declares people are their principals was shot during a real electrical storm that rolled through unexpectedly. You can actually hear distant thunder rumbling in the background of the theatrical release if you listen carefully. The storm created absolute chaos with the lighting equipment, causing power fluctuations and forcing the crew to constantly adjust. Sydney Pollack nearly called off the shoot multiple times, worried about equipment damage and safety. But Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford were so intense, so in the moment, that Pollack couldn't bring himself to yell cut. Their argument felt so raw and real that the technical problems seemed insignificant. The storm's ominous atmosphere actually added to the scene's emotional weight. Fact 19. Redford actually fell asleep. In the scene where Hubbell dozes off while Katie talks about politics, Robert Redford actually fell asleep, for real. He wasn't method acting or making a character choice. He was genuinely exhausted from the demanding shooting schedule, multiple night shoots, and the emotional intensity of working with Streisand. The cameras were rolling, Streisand was delivering her monologue about political activism, and Redford just dozed off. Streisand noticed but kept acting, thinking he was making an interesting choice. Sydney Pollack kept filming, curious to see what would happen. When Redford genuinely woke up confused and disoriented, his expression perfectly captured Hubbell's emotional distance. It was accidental genius. Pollack knew immediately it was a keeper, a perfect metaphor for their relationship. Fact 20. Crying at a dummy. The tender scene where Katie cries while watching Hubbell sleep was shot with a stand-in dummy, not Robert Redford. He'd already left for another film commitment when Sydney Pollack realized they needed pickup shots for proper coverage. Rather than reschedule Redford for one brief scene, they literally put a mannequin head with Redford-style hair on a pillow and had Barbra Streisand act opposite it. She was crying at nothing, pouring her heart out to a prop, while crew members stood around trying not to laugh. Streisand later called it the most ridiculous moment of her career, saying it felt like community theater rather than a major Hollywood production, but it worked. Her performance is heartbreaking and real. The audience has no idea she's looking at a dummy. Fact 21. Riptide warnings. The romantic Malibu beach scenes were shot during severe riptide warnings, with lifeguards stationed just outside the frame ready to dive in if anyone got pulled under. It was genuinely dangerous. The ocean was rough, the currents were strong, and insurance wouldn't cover water-related accidents because they'd shot without proper safety protocols. Barbra Streisand was genuinely terrified of the water and refused to go deeper than knee height, which is why all the beach shots are carefully framed with both actors close to shore. Sydney Pollack had to sign personal liability waivers, accepting responsibility if anyone drowned or got injured, essentially betting his career and personal assets that nothing would go wrong. Crew members later said the tension was unbearable watching two valuable stars wading in dangerous water. Fact 22. Heart attack on set. A crew member suffered a massive heart attack during the tense Blacklist hearing scene and collapsed behind the cameras during a take. You can't see it in the film, but everyone heard the crash. Someone yelled, "Stop," and the entire production ground to a halt. Paramedics arrived within minutes, performed CPR right there on set, and rushed him to the hospital. The crew member survived, thankfully, but several cast members later said the intense political atmosphere of that scene had everyone's nerves frayed. The scene depicted Katie being interrogated by the House Un-American Activities Committee, being forced to name names and betray her principles. It was emotionally brutal to film, and the added trauma of watching someone nearly die created a darkness that lingered for days. Fact 23. Guerrilla filmmaking in Manhattan. The New York street scenes were shot guerrilla-style without proper city permits because Columbia refused to pay for expensive Manhattan location permits. They had a skeleton crew, handheld cameras, and operated like independent filmmakers rather than a major studio production. Barbra Streisand wore a wig and oversized sunglasses between takes to avoid recognition, though people still noticed her. They technically broke multiple city ordinances and risked substantial fines if caught. If police had shown up and demanded permits, they would have had to pack up immediately and potentially face legal action. The risk was enormous, but so was the reward. The authentic New York atmosphere and genuine street energy couldn't have been recreated on a backlot or with proper permits requiring closed streets. Fact 24. Streisand's ankle injury. Barbra Streisand injured her ankle during the college rally scene, tripping on a camera cable and twisting it badly enough to require immediate medical attention. The set medic examined it and recommended she stop filming, ice it, possibly even go to the hospital for x-rays. Streisand refused. They were already behind schedule, the extras were hired only for that day, and reshooting would cost a fortune the production didn't have. She took prescription painkillers and kept working, limping through the rest of the day's scenes. If you watch carefully, you can actually see her favoring one leg in several subsequent scenes, particularly when she's walking or standing. She was on pain medication for the final week of production, working through genuine physical agony because the show had to go on. Fact 25. The party fire. The elegant party scene nearly burned down the actual house they were filming in when a practical candle effect went catastrophically wrong. They were using real candles for authentic mood lighting instead of safer electric alternatives. A prop curtain got too close to one of the candles and burst into flames, real flames spreading fast. Crew members rushed in with fire extinguishers, spraying foam everywhere while actors scrambled away. If you watch the final cut closely, there's one wide shot where you can see smoke that absolutely shouldn't be there drifting through the background. The homeowner threatened to sue Columbia for damages and endangerment. The studio settled out of court for an undisclosed amount rumored to be over $50,000, which was substantial in 1972. The incident could have killed someone. Fact 26. The score was almost rejected. Marvin Hamlish's now iconic score and the legendary theme song The Way We were initially rejected by Columbia executives, who called the music too sad, too melancholy, and uncommercial. They wanted something more upbeat and traditionally romantic, something that would appeal to easy-listening radio formats. They pushed Hamlish to write something happier, something with more commercial potential. Hamlish refused, threatening to quit the project entirely. He believed the melancholy tone was essential to the film's bittersweet love story. Barbra Streisand backed him up, using her star power to protect his vision. The studio reluctantly relented, and The Way We Were became one of the best-selling singles of 1974, topped the Billboard charts for 3 weeks, and won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Fact 27. The missing footage. Arthur Lawrence regretted the final cut until his death in 2011, claiming Sidney Pollack and the studio had butchered his script by removing over 30 minutes of political content that gave Katie's character depth and moral weight. The deleted scenes included Katie attending Communist Party meetings, more detailed HUAC testimony, and conversations about political philosophy that explained her unwavering commitment to her principles. Lawrence campaigned unsuccessfully for decades to release a director's cut or extended version restoring the material. He wrote letters, gave interviews, and tried to pressure Columbia. But the missing footage is believed to be lost or destroyed. Film preservationists have searched studio vaults repeatedly. Nothing. Those 30 minutes of political content that Lawrence considered essential to understanding Katie's character are gone forever. Fact 28. Redford refuses to discuss it. Robert Redford has consistently refused to discuss the film in depth for over 50 years, giving only cursory answers in interviews and notably skipping the film's various anniversary celebrations. He's attended 0 reunions, participated in 0 retrospectives, and declined every invitation to revisit the film publicly. He told one interviewer in 1985 that making the movie was like being in an emotional pressure cooker, and he's avoided watching it since the premiere. When asked directly about his relationship with Streisand, he changes the subject. When pressed about the film's legacy, he gives generic one-sentence responses. Industry insiders believe the experience was so unpleasant that he's chosen to mentally block it out entirely. For Redford, The Way We Were is a chapter he's permanently closed. Fact 29. The film was banned in multiple countries. The film was banned in several countries, including the Soviet Union and several Eastern Bloc nations, not for romantic content, but because of its sympathetic portrayal of American communist sympathizers and its criticism of McCarthyism. Soviet censors considered it Western propaganda that made American communists look like victims rather than revolutionary heroes. The irony was perfect. In America, some considered it too sympathetic to communism. In communist countries, it was banned for not being communist enough. It didn't screen in Russia until 1989 during Glasnost when censorship restrictions were relaxed. Even then, it was shown with limited distribution. The film was also banned in several Middle Eastern countries for depicting an interfaith romance between a Jewish woman and a presumably Protestant man. Fact 30. Streisand tried to make a sequel. Barbra Streisand tried to get a sequel made in the 1990 seconds, following Katie and Hubbell reuniting as older adults during the Gulf War. She commissioned a script, secured financing, and approached Robert Redford, who flatly refused. The script was leaked online in 2003 and is widely considered terrible by fans, with forced plot contrivances and dialogue that completely undermine the original's ambiguous ending.